Hey, welcome to today's lecture on understanding the concept of travel behavior. There is no way we'll be able to look into the concept of transportation engineering or talk about transportation engineering without really looking at what the behavior of the users of the, the road or the transportation modes react, how they react to the use. And that is where we look into what we call the travel behavior. And this concept can be coined from two things. We have the travel, and we also have what we call the behavior. And let's break it down. First, let's look at the aspect of the travel. What is travel? We know travel is the act of moving between distant geographical locations. And this movement can be done by various means. It can be done maybe by foot, it can be done by the use of a bicycle or a motorcycle or an airplane. So it can also be a one-way or a round-trip journey. That is, when we say it is a one-way, that means you are only going in one direction from the origin to the destination. So I think oftentimes during this lecture, we're going to be using the word origin and destination. So what is origin? Origin is the starting point of the movement or the journey. So if you're leaving your house to your work, that is your home or your house is the origin. So the place you're going to will be your destination. And that destination might be your workplace, it might be a market, it might be your school. So it can be any of that. So we said it is one way if it is just a movement from the house or your home to your workplace, that is just a one way. But if it has to do with you from leaving your origin, which is your house, to your workplace, which is the destination, and from your destination back to the origin, which is your home or your house, then that is a round trip journey. So that is another important aspect we need to know on the travels. That is, we have the origin and we have what we call the destination. And then oftentimes we call the destination also, we call it a reference location. So just in case I'm using this word interchangeably, it's just to have an idea of what it is all about. So, and there are sometimes we go on these our travels, maybe we go with luggages, and there are sometimes we decide to travel without any luggage. It all depends. So there are some kind of travels we go to with our luggages, and there are some we decide to go. It all depends sometimes about the purpose of what the travel is all about. We're still going to be looking into more of that under the behavioral part of this concept. And sometimes we travel just for high sights, for sightseeing, sorry. So we travel for sightseeing, we travel for vacations, we travel for academic purposes, for work. And using the word travel here does not necessarily mean that it has to be a long journey or it has to be from city to city or from country to country. So even if it is short distance, it is also called a form of travel. So here is what the idea of travel is all about. So we are also going to be looking at the concept of behavior. So when we mention the word behavior, what is the first thing that comes to my mind? I think you think about your attitude, you think about the way you react, the way you behave. Yes, that's the word. That's the word. The way you behave. But what exactly is the concept behind that behavior? It says behavior is a person's external reaction to their environment. What are we trying to say? A person's behavior, environment. So what is it talking about? So that means there is an external reaction, the external reaction that comes from an individual. So whatever happening that is happening in that environment is what we term as behavior. And all behaviors which may be in form of maybe yelling, crying, running, or throwing something. All these things can be boiled down around an event or something happening within that environment. For example, if someone comes into the house and if a family friend, let's say for an instance, or someone, a friend of yours comes in and gives you bad news about maybe another friend of a very close friend of yours who just died or something, there is going to be a behavior. You're going to exhibit a form of behavior which definitely is not going to be which is not going to be maybe by smiling or laughing. There is actually going to be a response in to that news or whatever thing that is happening around you. So behavior, we say, as I say, is that external reaction. How you react externally to your environment is what behavior is all about. So in psychology, sorry, I have to bring in a little bit of psychology because there is no way we're going to be talking about behavior without mentioning the aspect of behaviorism. Behaviorism is a concept or a theory in which is also called behavior in behavioral psychology. And what is behavioral psychology or behaviorism all about? So this is a school of thought that is behavioral psychology, or whether we call it behaviorism, is a school of thought that focuses on the study of observable behavior and how it is learned and influenced by environmental factors. Now, what this concept is trying to say is that there are some observable behaviors that is learned, and how it is learned and influenced by external factors. So some of our behaviors are being influenced by some external factors, just like the example I made mention of earlier on. So there, and in this case, in the aspect of psychology, that is when we get to see psychology studying behavior by observing and recording how people act in various situations, looking for patterns and connections between the stimulus and the responses. So, no, I don't want to go too much into the aspect of psychology, but there is, like I said earlier, there is no way we're going to be looking into the aspect of travel behavior without having an understanding of the connectivity within transportation, the mode of transportation, the travel behavior, and psychology, because it has to do with how do people, because here we under the travel behavior that we're looking at the behavior of individuals, of road users towards their travel. So no matter how much it is, there is no way we'll be going into this conversation without bringing in the concept of psychology. And we know that when we're looking at the behavior or the behavioral patterns, we know behaviors can be influenced by different factors. We have what we call the internal factors that influence the behavior, and what we call the external factors that influence the behavior. So for the internal factors, we have it in form of our thoughts, in form of our feelings, or our biological processes. For example, we can see ladies during their, or maybe their ovulation period, or when they are having their menstrual cycle, there is a certain level of behavior everybody gets to know that some of them, because we cannot generalize it in this point, like some of them behave a certain way, and you can see people say, okay, is this your time of the month, just because of some certain behaviors we see some ladies, exhibit during those periods, and this can be in form of their biological processes. For example, let's look into the aspect of the feelings, which is also an internal factor. If a man or a lady or a guy just got dumped off, just got up from a relationship, there is a certain level of behavior you expect, maybe being moody, being sad, So all these things are as a result of something. So these are what we call the internal factors. And looking out for the external factors like the environment and the interaction with others can also form a part of this. So, and how is it that a psychologist look into most of all these things? They look into it by observing and recording how people act in various situations. Over time, we have been able to understand how people act in various situations for us to be able to develop a pattern and connection between what and what influence that behavior. So, in talking about this aspect where we call the behaviorism or the behavioral psychology, we know that this theory was propounded by a popular psychologist called John B. Watson, and where he published it in his book called The Psychology as the Behaviorist View It. So we won't be going much into this aspect of behavior, but this is just to give us an introduction of what it is to travel and what it means to have a behavior and the concepts and the breakdown behind behavior. So now looking into the concept of travel behavior, what is travel behavior? Now, say travel behavior is the study of what people do over the space and time with regard to their need for transportation. So what we're saying is that we need to study, because the travel behavior talks about the study of what they do within that space and time through the need of transportation, when they need transportation. So what did they do within that period when there is a need for transportation? So the travel behavior helps us to examine the how, the why, the when, and where people travel. So understanding travel behavior is critical for planning efficient, sustainable, and user-friendly transportation system, because there is no way that if we do not have a good understanding of the travel behavior, if we don't have a good understanding of the travel behavior of an individual or a group of people or people within a state, then it will not help in critical planning of the efficient and sustainable means at which road resources are being effectively distributed to areas in which it is much more important. There are some cities in every state or every province that requires more attention, maybe due to the population of people or the area in which people tend to travel more so within that location compared to other cities or other locations. So understanding this behavior or this travel behavior helps us to channel the right resources in order to avoid every form of maybe road congestion, or in order to avoid unfamiliar or delay, and to establish a user-friendly transportation system within that city or within that state. So from what we also have here, it says it refers to the study of how people make decisions regarding their transportation choices, including the mode of travel, the route selections, and the frequency and travel time. So I made mention of the reference location the other time. So there are major things that this concept is all about. The first is the length of the travel, which is quite important. We also have to understand the location. When we're talking about the location here, it can be in form of the origin and the destination. So where is the origin? Where am I traveling from? Or where am I going from? And the destination talks about where is it going to be. The mode of transportation talks about which mode of transportation are we going to be making use of. Is it by walking, maybe leaving my workplace, or leaving my home to my workplace, maybe I have to walk, or maybe I use a bicycle, or I use the public bus, or I use a ride sharing platform, maybe like Didi, like boats, like whichever one it is. And the time, how long does it take? This can be in form of maybe how long it takes to travel or to move from the home to the workplace, or at what time of the day that this the transportation or the travel is going to be happening, and also the purpose. The purpose can be in form of for work, it can be for pleasure, it can be for recreational activities or whatsoever it is. So all these are very important when we're looking into the concept of travel behavior. So this is a general view of what the concept of travel behavior is all about. But when we're looking at this view in an a transportation engineering perspective, it gives a little bit of a different form of definition or a different form of view regarding what the travel behavior is all about compared to what we have here at the moment. Because in transportation engineering, the travel behavior it refers to is also a study, because like I said, it's always a study. But this time around, the kind of terminologies that are used, because this is engineering, is quite different. And that is, it studies the human mobility patterns, that is the decisions and preferences that directly influence the design, operations, and evaluation of transportation systems. So what are we trying to say in a nutshell? That is, it helps the engineers that are involved, to study or understand why, the how, the when, and the where people travel. And this enables data-driven planning and optimization of transportation infrastructure. Now, we can see from this definition and that of the, the general definition, or the one who relates to that of the psychology, they are all similar, because at the end of the day, it is very important to study the why, the how, the when, and the where people travel. So having a good understanding of that helps in planning, transportation planning, and optimization of transport infrastructures. For example, we can have in a city for example, you can observe that most of the industries or the companies in a particular city are much more concentrated, maybe let's say in the northern part of the city or the western part of the city. Let's say, for example, if the engineers or the psychologists, or just based on what we're talking about here, can observe the travel patterns, say people move from every other part of the city to the northern part of the city because that is where the companies or where most of them work. It is very important for engineers to be able to channel the transportation infrastructure in that line because they could see that there is much more movement of people and there is a pattern of travel behavior in that regard or in that location. And that means that there is much more need for concentration of planning and getting enough data of the movement of people in that direction, whether in one way or in form of a two-way journey, in order to avoid maybe in form of travel delay or congestion, since it can be observed that there's a level of concentration of people going or working or having activities in that part of the city. So this is quite important because what the psychologists help us to do is also to understand the behavioral pattern of individuals. And similar to that is what an engineer does. But furthermore is now an engineer putting in place the optimization of that transportation infrastructure and also enabling data-driven planning in order to have a free flow and user-friendly transportation system for users. So furthermore, we said that understanding travel behavior is essential for urban planners, not just urban planners, but also transportation policymakers and service providers. And all this is in order to enable them able to design efficient, sustainable, and user-friendly transportation systems. So I already explained that in the previous slide, and it also helps in predicting future travel demands and addressing urban mobility challenges. So in the area of helping to predict future travel demand is to know that in a given location where we know that maybe some companies are trying to set up new companies or probably set up industries in some certain areas, through this travel behavior, it will help us to know what to expect in those areas and to be able to predict what the travel demand is going to be like and addressing any form of mobility challenges that might arise from that area or that city. Moving on. So we have the basic elements that a traveler needs to decide before leaving their origin for an activity or the sequence of purpose. These are more like the key elements of travel behavior. So we have about up to about eight of it here, eight or nine. So but in some forms or in some concepts you might see it maybe as five, in some cases it might be as four, but this is just a little bit much more comprehensive in which I had to put together. And the first part here, the first basic element of travel behavior here is what we call the trip purpose. So what is the purpose of a trip? Why is an individual embarking on that travel? Is it just for commuting? Is it for shopping? Is it for educational purposes like maybe going to school? Is it for leisures? Is it for work? Whatever thing it is, that is one of the first of the basic elements of that travel behavior. You need to ability to understand the purpose of the trip, which is what I already explained. And the second one we have here is the time of travel. So time of travel talks about at what duration or at what time is the travel happening. What do we mean by this period? Is when we try to compare the peak hours and also the off-peak hours. The comparing all these things or maybe the weekdays or the weekends. Looking at the city I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, when you're going to walk from the island, from the mainland, we have what we call the mainland to the highland. So when you're going to walk from the mainland to the highland on the Monday morning, we know by 7 a.m. is to 8 a.m. is the peak period of travel within that route, and there is usually a lot of traffic congestions. There is usually a lot of delays on the road because there is high volume of vehicles going in the same direction to that particular place, which is the highland. So you see most people, as a result of understanding the behavior or what it looks like on the road within that period on the Monday morning, you see people leave their houses as early as 4 a.m., 5 a.m. in order to beat the traffic congestion or delay on the road in order to get to the main and to the island as soon as possible. So what I'm trying to say is Monday morning is usually a peak hour or a peak period for commuting between the mainland to the highland as a result of the volume of vehicles on the road at that particular time. And when you're traveling maybe later in the afternoon or maybe by 2 p.m., 1 a.m., 1 p.m., there is usually no form of congestion on the road. It's usually a free travel within those periods. So that is what we're talking about, the time of travel. So understanding if it is going to be in a peak period or the peak hour or the off-peak hours, or whether it's going to be during the weekdays or the weekends. Weekdays or the weekends. Coming back, I will always use the reference of where I grew up because I have a lot of information about the area. In Lagos, or basically in Nigeria as a whole, everybody knows Monday to Fridays is majorly work days. Like those are the days you go to work. But on Saturdays, these are when there is always a celebration. Whether a wedding, there is always going to be something happening in a particular location at that time on the Saturday. Maybe we're talking about weddings, or probably a funeral, or probably birthday celebration. Because some people go as far as celebrating their birthdays or shifting their birthdays if it falls during the week to the weekend in order to be able to celebrate with family and friends, which is beautiful and lovely. But all these things also contribute to also the element of a traveler's needs or the behavior, because there is always an understanding behind a typical Nigerian or a typical Lagosian knowing that Saturdays are usually for what we call in the local term Owambe. So it is just those days we use for knowing that there's going to be something to go out to celebrate. There's going to be somewhere you have to go to enjoy or celebrate with people. There's always something happening. So that defines the Saturday. Sundays are now the days where you see most people go to churches or they go to mosque. So, and this also, you have to understand the peak period of when they tend to go to church, or sometimes you see some people having morning service or some people having their evening service. So these are also important things that we need to be aware of under the time of travel, which is also an important element of travel behavior. The next aspect is what we call the duration. It talks about how long. That is, it answers the question of how long. How long is it going to be? If I am leaving my origin to a destination, let's assume my origin is my home, so destination, which is my office. So what is the duration going to look like? Will it be for 20 minutes? Does it take 20 minutes? Does it 30 minutes? Does it take an hour before I could travel from my origin to my destination or my reference location? So that explains what duration is as an important element also for travel behavior. Then we have the mode choice. The mode choice we're talking about here is what mode of transportation will be used for the travel, like what form of transportation or the mode choice or mode of transportation used. Will it be the use of the car? Will it be the use of public transport? Will it be by walking, or will it be by cycling? Will it be by ride sharing, like in form of what we call in China Didi, or in Nigeria we call it Bolt, Uber, in the United States, like that. So which choice or mode of choice will be used in this regard? So that is what we call the mode choice. Then we move to the next point, which is the route choice. The route choice is to determine if it is going to be the shortest path, or probably it's going to be the fastest route, or it's going to be the scenic route. So you need to have an understanding of also, as this being an element of travel behavior, whether it's going to be the shortest or the fastest route in deciding a travel or understanding the travel behavior. Then the next one has to do with the location of the activity. So where is the activity taking place? Is it at a shopping mall? Is it at work? So that is where the concept of origin and destination comes into play. Because when we're talking about the location, we're talking about maybe two or more locations here. When we say two or more locations, I'm talking about we have the origin and we have the destination. Origin, like we said, we have been using so far in this video, is usually the home, and the destination is the office. But for some people, they might decide that from living, let's for example, a married man who has a wife and children might decide that as he's leaving the home in the morning, he wants to drop off his kids in their school before leaving for work. So that means the movement will be from the home to the children's school, and from the children's school then to work. So then maybe later after the end of the day, from his destination, that is his workplace, back to the children's school, picking them up, then coming back home. So the location of the activity is also very important, whether there is going to be an intermediary visit or intermediary um, stops within the origin and the location and the origin and the destination within a travel. It's also very important, or it's just going to be a one way or a round trip. These are under the location of the activity. And then we have what we call the participants of the activity. If an individual decides to take a walk or decides to go for recreation activities, okay, is it going to be just an individual, is a person going alone, or it's going to be accompanied maybe by a dog or a cat or a friend or a child? So these are what we call the participants of the activity. The next point is the frequency of travel. The frequency of that travel talks about is it something that happens daily? Is something that happens weekly? Is it an occasional event? Is it something that happens seasonally? Or we know Christmas is usually once in a year. Or when you're going to work, it's more like a daily activity, or probably something we can say happens like 5 to 6 times in a week, which can still be said as a weekly or a daily activity. Or a weekly activity which can be going to church or going to the mosque. That could be a weekly activity, or going to the temple, or maybe something that is occasional, maybe a birthday celebration, or we're talking about a wedding celebration, or funeral celebration, or remembrance, anything. So these all falls under the frequency of travel. The frequency of travel, it's very important to know the frequency of travel and relating it to the purpose of the trip. Then the last part is the expenditure. Expenditure talks about how much it's going to cost in making that travel or making that trip. So that is the concept of expenditure. So these are the basic elements of travel behavior, and from there we will be looking into. So we're now going to be looking into the factors that influences the travel behavior. So we have a series of factors that influences travel behavior, and one of it we're going to be looking at is what we call the socio-economical factors, and here we know has to do with the age. Under this, we have the income, the education, the employment status, and household size. We cannot compare a family of three, that is the father, the wife, or the man, the wife, and the child, compared to a family where we have the man, three wives, and seven children. The house or the household size is going to be a factor to consider when it comes to travel behavior. Most especially in Nigeria, I'll keep using that as an example because it illustrates this perfectly. In Nigeria, we have what we call the nuclear family and the extended families, where you have a family of three and you see some families with a family of 15, maybe the father, four, three wives, or with seven children. So when there is any form of travel or movement from one place to the other, maybe for grocery shopping, maybe for recreational activities, we cannot compare the household, the family of four or the family of 15 or 12 when it comes to the road use or the travel. It's going to be different from that of a family of four. And the same thing when it comes to education. For someone who is learned or someone who has a level of education, their level of travel behavior will also be different. And these are some of the factors that influences it. The same thing with the age. Compare when a 17 or 18-year-old travels to that of a 40 or 50-year-old. So there are two different things. Employment status, if you're employed, unemployed, or having a make a kind of job. These are also some factors that needs to be considered. So these fall under the socio-economical factors. And the second one we have is what we call the psychological and behavioral factors. Under the psychological and behavioral factors talks about individual preferences. There are some people, I know of some people growing up that no matter how expensive, no matter the state of the country, no matter the inflation, no matter how much it is, they will tell you they will never take a public bus or take a public transport. It's either they order a ride or maybe they engage in maybe having some of their friends come to pick them up to go to a gathering. So they have that preference of that comfort and that comfort. They believe so much in privacy and comfortability when they're traveling or when they're moving from one location to the other. And we know of other people well decides that no, I don't need a car, I don't want to have a car, even if I have what it takes to have a car, I don't want to have a car. I prefer to just take rides to wherever I want to go. And there are some people who stick to their goals, even no matter where they want to go, they prefer to take a car. The same thing for some set of people or individuals who might decide that they prefer taking public transport to whichever place they want to go to, maybe as a result of considering the cost involved, or probably it's just their personal preference. So the psychological and behavioral factors, this is one of the most important part of it, which is the individual preference. The second point we have here is also the risk perception. Some people prefer not to take a share ride, maybe carpooling, or maybe a bus or a public transport as a result of maybe the risk perception. Risk perception does not only come when it comes to in form of maybe accidents alone, or in form of not just about accident, or maybe in form of maybe robbery or anything that could happen in the through the travel. It can also be in form of contracting maybe communicable diseases or any form of infections, maybe by taking those kind of courses. So these can also be part of the psychological and behavioral factor. Another one is their attitude towards transportation options. Like I already explained in the example that I gave earlier. So people just have this kind of perception towards it. You know, there used to be a time when I'm going to work. I think personally, when I'm taking the public transport to work in when I was in Nigeria, when I'm taking the public transport to work, I do not take, I do not wear white shirts. If I'm going to work, I hardly wear white shirt. The reason being that in most cases when I wear a white shirt, before I get to work, it's always stained, or probably there's always going to be something on it that has, stained the clothes. Because most of the public transport is either maybe they're a little bit rusty, or the other people who are coming into that bus are not as kept as you are. So some might be coming in with maybe their greasy clothes, messy clothes, and sitting beside you, there is nothing like maybe there is a space between you guys in the bus. So this can also be because of that attitude. It helps some people to have this perception towards some transportation options, and that is also another factor. Then the third point of the factor we have is the technological factor. Here we talk about the availability of share ride apps, real-time traffic updates, and electric vehicles. Electric vehicles, we can see much of that in China, and availability of ride-sharing apps. Here we have it in almost every country, though the use of it might differ in every country. But for using Nigeria, China, United States, and every of these countries for an example, it is quite very well known and well used. I think in most of the developed countries, yes, it is. Even developing and underdeveloped, yeah, they have. So the introduction of ride sharing apps is becoming something where everyone is keen into. So this is also another factor. The fourth factor we have is the infrastructures and the accessibility. How accessible is some of these things? When we're talking about the accessibility of infrastructure, talking about the quality of roads, availability of public transportation, and distance to destination. People will keep telling me they will not stay. Using Nigeria and as an example again, we have different states, yes. So I'm going to pick in the two populous and then industrial states we have in Nigeria. We have Lagos and we have Abuja. Now, people that I've met as friends who are staying in other states or probably staying in Lagos or in Abuja will tell you they prefer life in Abuja to that of Lagos, even when Lagos is much more exposed and the level of exposure and the business and population in Lagos is quite on the high side. But people will still prefer the life in Abuja. Why? Because maybe number one is the quality of the road and the availability of public transport and distance to destination. Compared to Lagos, where you have to deal with a lot of traffic congestion, you have to deal with some bad roads. Like the quality of road is not as that of that compared to that we have in Abuja. So these are some of the factors that influences travel behavior, and you will see that over time you see people migrating from state to another state where there is much more quality roads and then accessibility and availability of public transport and giving a good distance to different destinations. Mm. Some states have, give or take, a good number of hours or minutes to get to their destination. But in some cities or in some states, it's very difficult for you to even predict how long it's going to take for you to leave your origin to the destination. So in most cases, you have to maybe leave about 30 minutes earlier or an hour earlier because you don't know what the road condition will be like when you embark on that journey. So infrastructure and accessibility is also another important factor in influencing travel behavior. And then the last point here, we have the environmental and policy factors. Policy factors, when we look into the fuel price, the changes in climatic conditions and the government regulations. So the fuel prices enables, there was a period in Nigeria where there was a hike in the fuel price when the subsidy was removed. And when this happened, a lot of vehicles, the level of the volume of vehicles on the road reduces. Why? Because most people or most car users cannot afford to buy the fuel at that price. So instead of taking out their cars, they have to keep it in the house and decide to use maybe public transport or every other form of mode of transportation. And that is as a result of the fuel prices. So this also plays a role in travel behavior. When price the fuel price is high, the chances of the number of vehicles or the volume of vehicles on the road will be less or lower, because the higher the fuel price, it affects the number of vehicles that are going to be on the road, compared to when we have a lower price level for fuel. It's also going to affect the number of vehicles we're going to be having and the number of people purchasing those vehicles. The same thing when it comes to government regulations. Government regulations when it comes to HOV, in sense of the road use, is also another important factor. When we're talking about that is high occupancy vehicles, giving a certain lane for some certain vehicles, or probably the encouragement of carpooling, the number of people in the car to move in a particular direction. So these are some of the policies that can also have influence on the travel behavior. The same thing with the climatic conditions too, whether it is raining, sunny, when there is snow. This also plays a role in this. So we're going to be looking into some case studies of, the first one is Lagos, Nigeria. We also have another case study with that in Singapore, talking about the travel behavior. We have the one in Amsterdam, Netherlands, or the Holland, and we have the one in Norway. So these are just 4 case studies we're just going to be looking at briefly, and just to have a better understanding on the concept of travel behavior. The first case study we have here is that of Nigeria and Lagos, Nigeria, talking about the impact of ride sharing on travel behavior in Nigeria. We know Lagos is a state in Nigeria with a very high population density, and if there is anything that is peculiar with Lagos, it's the traffic congestion. It is one of the most discouraging part of transportation in the state, because there is high level or high number of vehicles on the road, and the road capacity cannot accommodate this number of vehicles, and this leads to what we call the traffic congestion. And as a result of this high population density and traffic congestion, it has seen the significant adoption of ride-sharing platforms like the Ubers and the Bolt. And from what we have seen over the last couple of years, research indicates that the ride-sharing has influenced travel behavior by providing alternative mobility solutions, reducing private car ownership aspirations, and modifying peak hour traffic patterns. But there are still some concerns with this. So with the introduction of the Uber and the Bolt rides and other platforms, because these are not the only ones, we have LagRide, we have Rider, we have eDrive, a lot of other applications that have been adopted over the years. So it has enabled users or road users or passengers or commuters to use some of these ride-sharing platforms rather than making use of their cars. And this also helps to reduce the level of traffic congestion in the country. But we still have some challenges such as the safety concerns and the pricing fluctuations, which also impact user choices. In the last maybe 5 years ago, it was quite affordable for commuters to use this ride-sharing application. But in the last 2 years, in the last 1 year, it has been very difficult. Why? Because there is now the prices of fuel has gone up, and there is inflation in the country, and this has caused an increase in the pricing of using some of those platforms. And this is also a big concern in this. But over the years, with this travel behavior and the adoption of this, it has also influenced the introduction of the ride sharing app has impacted travel behavior in Lagos, Nigeria. Not just only Lagos, Nigeria, even in other states like Port Harcourt, like Abuja, and other states also in the country. Now we are going to be looking into the second case study, that is the public transport usage in Singapore. I think over the years there has been a high percentage of daily commuters relying on what they call MRT, that is mass rapid transport. In Nigeria we call it BRT, which is bus rapid transport. And this MRT, the larger number of commuters rely on it for their daily transportation or their daily movement, maybe from work to whatever place they are going to, and making use of buses. And the government's investment in this integral transportation network, coupled with policies, now helps to discourage private car ownership, because the need to have a private car ownership is not really as predominant as since the introduction or the introduction of this mass rapid transport or transit. And this has led to sustainable travel behavior trends. And also adding to it is the use of contactless payments and mobile applications for route optimization, also has enhanced user experience. I think the contactless payment is also applicable in China also. The third case study we have here, we have the shift from private cars to cycling in Amsterdam, Netherlands. So thinking about this, there is no way we'll talk about cycling that we won't also think about China, because it's also predominant in China. So Amsterdam has successfully transformed travel behaviors by promoting cycling as a dominant mode of transport. Government policies such as dedicated cycling and incentives for bicycle owners to have led to a decline in private vehicle usage. So that means as a result of the introduction of this policy of promoting cycling in the country, it has led to a reduction in carbon emission, which is a result of the use of vehicles in the city or in the country, and making an improved urban livability for, for people in that country. So the focus has shifted from just the use of vehicles or cars, but also the use of bicycles, or in China what we call the e-bikes, which is quite probably very much popular in China, because China also adopts or is or probably making use of a similar system where bicycles and e-bicycles is a predominant force in China, where most people, rather than making use of rather than making use of cars or making use of the public transport, they can easily use the bicycle for travels within whether a short distance or whatever distance that is quite comfortable for them. And the government has made this very much accessible, easy, and affordable for everyone to be able to make use of in the country. And this is another shift from private cars to cycling in Amsterdam and Netherlands, which is also similar to in China. So this is another case, which is the case 3. We're looking into the case 4. The case 4 is the rise of electric vehicles, EVs in Norway. One thing, the difference between the use of EVs and the conventional vehicles is most importantly the fuel and the carbon emission. It is very important because the use of the regular vehicles creates a lot of pollution in the society as a result of what we call the air pollution, as a result of the carbon monoxide and the carbon emission. But Norway has witnessed a behavioral shift towards electric vehicles adoption due to government subsidies, toll exemptions, and extensive charging infrastructures. That is, infrastructures for charging are made available at strategic places and accessible for everyone who are making use of these electric vehicles. And more than 80% of new car sales in Norway are electric, significantly impacting travel behavior and reducing reliance on fossil fuels. And this is very important, and this is a very good case under the travel behavior. So one thing we can come to a conclusion of in this study is that the travel behavior is crucial for understanding how people interact with transportation, because if we do not have a good understanding of this behavior, it is not going to be important for all. It is not going to be easy for us to be able to know the right technical know-how or the technology or the right substitute of transportation system that needs to be adopted in order to solve some of those problems. And it is as a result of the study of this transportation behavior that helps us to be able to interact with transportation system and how external factors influence the mobility choices. So I think in the next video, we'll be looking into some of the theories that are in travel behavior. We have what we call the theories. We have a lot of theories in that is aspect. We'll be looking into that in the next video. But for now, that'll be it. Thank you. So if you have any questions, you can drop it in the comment section and we can review them together.